We're going to do a road trip from Riyadh to Dammam.
You can get claustrophobic in the desert. Oh. I didn't know where the exit was.
We're in a car in a desert. Open the door.
One thing I remember is the music.
You're a dancehall girl.
I like dancehall, exactly.
Have a look at Sarah. She does not strike you as Miss Sean Paul and dancehall classic.
I look like a BBC newsreader or...
She doesn't dance like a BBC newscaster. She dances like that gal you meet in Chabi.
The dress code, right? Which is what's in everyone's mind.
It's a Islamic country.
It's called modest dressing, basically.
That's the word I was trying to think of, modest. And if you don't know what that is, ask your grandmother. Unless you come from Essex. Because then she's probably almost the same age.
Oh, God.
And it still remains one of the most amazing adventures that we've done.
So welcome. This is Bantering Across Borders, and we are two best friends, and between us we have been to over 100 countries. So we're going to be sharing stories of our adventures, reminiscing about our random escapades, and looking back at the highs and lows of our trips, all while unpacking what it means for the two of us to be friends. Mm-hmm. So I'm Sarah. This is Tony.
Thank you.
And today, Tony, we are going to...
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. This is our first trip, this road trip together. This was our first road trip together.
It was our first ever road trip that we did.
Yes, it was spontaneously decided upon. What were your initial expectations about Saudi Arabia?
So traveling to Saudi, to be quite honest, I was scared, right? Mm-hmm. Because I was traveling there for business. So this was back in 2012, 2013. And I just had all my colleagues and all these horror stories telling me that, you know, I was going to be taken at the airport if I wasn't covered properly. I kept hearing all of these stories about the religious police, etc. So quite frankly, I was quite scared to go.
Okay. And since... how do you feel since?
Now, I love Saudi. I love Saudi. It's got such a vibe, really, particularly these days. It's changed a lot since we first started traveling there. But now I'd go there every other weekend if I could. It's a great place.
Well, I'm still there. Please.
You come to Dubai every weekend.
Exactly.
So both of us first met in Dubai, and then I think 6 months later, or within 6 months.
So we met in 2012, and then 2013 it was when we met. And then I moved from Dubai at the end of 2013, and then in 2014 I moved to Saudi, and it was a little bit lonely. Yes, I was sad and lonely.
And we'd only known each other, I think, for about 6 months, right, at that stage. Yeah. And as you said, you moved to Saudi, and then I started going to Saudi on business. Yeah. And I remember you being ecstatic that I'd come over to visit you because at the time...
I know someone, yay! Because who doesn't live here?
Because at the time, and a lot of people don't realise this about Saudi, but at the time it was much more difficult being a single man in Saudi, in my opinion, than it was to be a single female. So I remember...
Well, single females, remember, could only come in on a business visa. They couldn't just wander in.
That's true. I mean, it was difficult to travel there. But what I mean is, for example, you were ecstatic when I came across because you wanted to go shopping, right?
Well, there was that, yes.
And as a single male, you were very restricted on where you could go. Yeah. And so as soon as I came over, I think the first thing we did was visit a mall, basically.
Shopping opportunities were very limited. So, I mean, for me, that's the way I like to spend time. When I first moved to Dubai, I was in the Mall of the Emirates every 5 minutes, and the Dubai Mall. But but in Saudi, you walked into a mall, and basically you walked into the mall and just walked around the mall and then came back out again because you couldn't go into any of the shops unless you were accompanied.
Exactly. So as a single male, there were literally signs on the doors
everywhere.
Saying families only, so you weren't allowed to go in, right? Yeah,
a lot of the shops were families only. But even it wasn't just there. I mean, I remember going to Kingdom Mall and going downstairs to the food court, and you go to the food court and it's singles and families. So even to go to McDonald's to get something to eat, and not just McDonald's, every food emporium, there was 2 queues, singles and families, and there'd be no one in the family queue and about 20 blokes lined up in the singles queue, and you say, can I go? No. You know, so it was a very strange environment as a single person, and particularly as a single expat, unless you lived on a compound, and I just didn't want to do the compound life. But yes, I was very, very happy when you came across, and we used to meet, and we used to go across to the mall, and we used to go shopping, and we used to go out for dinner, and that was great. And then you said, let's do a road trip.
Yeah, let's do a road trip. Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. Let's do a road trip, because whenever do you get the chance to do a road trip essentially across the desert, right?
Yeah, and it was across the desert on those crazy roads, and yes, that was very. The driving was interesting. Getting a car was even more interesting. I still think that was his cousin's car.
Yeah, it was some kind of ramshackle.
It was horrible.
Like bolted together piece of metal that
it was dirty. I felt like Adrian Monk. I wish I had wipes, but it was terrible.
For people who don't know, Riyadh is right in the center of Saudi Arabia, like literally right in the middle of the desert. I remember literally my first impression of Riyadh was when I was on the plane, my first time sort of traveling to Saudi. But then the announcement comes over the tannoy that, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're about to land in Riyadh. And I looked down and there's nothing. It just looked like... It really, I was thinking, is this city underground? Because there was nothing. Like, it wasn't like a typical city. You couldn't see, lights. You couldn't make out any sort of buildings. And so I really thought that I was landing in the middle of nowhere. So when we did that road trip, as you say, it was Riyadh to Dammam. You literally move in from the center of Saudi right across to and I'm bad at directions, the east,
Eastern region,
to the east region, to the coast. And it was what, like 6 hours or something?
It took about 6 hours that day. Yeah, it was a long drive. It takes slightly less now. I mean, it's 3 to 4 hours. If you drive like a Saudi, it's even faster. But yeah, it's about 3 to 4 hours, and it's a long journey. It's a long journey. The roads have got a lot better. But yeah, it was an adventure. And it still remains one of the most amazing adventures that we've done.
Well, it literally was the first trip we had ever done together.
Yeah.
We'd only ever met kind of like in cafes and bars in Dubai previously. And then I guess we were then committing to 6 hours sitting together in a car, driving across the desert. And so I think that sort of cemented our friendship, right?
Yeah, I mean, it ticked the box. It really ticked the box. It was like, can I get on with this person? Other than on a fleeting visit. And yeah, I think that was the foundation. I nearly said groundation. I thought, that's not a word. Foundation, yeah, it really was. What do you like most about Saudi Arabia?
The men. No, seriously, like Rihanna has some good taste.
Rihanna met the rich ones.
Yeah, no, but he like a Saudi men. I mean, I like a beard anyway, right? Yeah, sorry, I asked you to shave today, but no, I mean, but joking aside, I really so Saudi men are quite good looking. I find they're also sort of quite tall, but generally the population is very welcoming. And what I really liked about
welcoming,
I mean, I remember like
the reason I asked that again is because that's not the reputation that they have internationally.
Quite, yeah, exactly. And I remember landing in Saudi, as I said, with all my preconceptions, and I wasn't even in my abaya yet, so I had all of these horror stories in mind that I was about to be taken away and clad in a burqa or whatever. And I arrived, got into the queue for immigration, and I saw this official coming towards me, like this Saudi guy, and literally things going through my mind like that. This is it, And he literally saw that I looked like a deer in headlights, I think, and just came over to welcome me, like on behalf of the country. And to be honest, if I was in any other country and somebody came up, like a man came up to me in the airport, I'd be, checking my bags and everything, being very alert. But this was literally a very, very welcoming gesture. They wanted to make sure that I, as a single woman, I guess, whereas not that I had someone to pick me up, and did I know where I was going, etc. And of course, I was there on business, so all of that thing was arranged. But it just changed my mindset immediately from being kind of scared and landing in this, middle of the desert, to being treated very nicely by the people at immigration, and then generally having worked there, and they were just very happy to share their culture, and very open. And the other thing that you and I have talked about quite a lot about, the great thing about Saudi is this mix of, it's a very young country, right? It's a very, very young country. And it's a mix of being very entrepreneurial. So, but based on a foundation of being very, very traditional. So the country itself, I think it's like 93, 94 years old. So it's a young country in, compared to the European countries. But it's based on a very traditional kind of Arabic history that's been around for centuries. And you just feel that kind of merge of those two cultures. And it makes for such an interesting and exciting and exhilarating vibe, I think.
Yeah, I mean, having lived there for 2 stints of just over 3 years each time, I have to say that the first stint and the time when we're talking about was, you could feel that something could happen, which has.
There was change in the air, right?
There was change in the air, particularly at the beginning of 2015, which was just after our trip. But 2015, when the King died and MBS and the others did their vying for power, and MBS finally came through. But you could feel that there was a change that had been waiting to happen, and he's pushed it through. And when I went back in 2021, it literally was a completely different country, and it is now. I remember going out for dinner in 2021. I remember going out for dinner, and I sat in the restaurant and we were eating. We were halfway through the meal, and I thought, there's something here that's really weird, and I can't work out what it is. And it's not the food. The food is fine, Okay, fine. It's that we're not in the family section, because the family section's
gone, right? Yeah. It's everyone's mixing together these days.
Everybody's mixing together, and then it suddenly occurred to me, there's music playing.
Oh wow!
Because before that there was no music.
No, exactly.
It was haram. And it took a little while for me to suddenly, there's music playing in the restaurant. And then you suddenly realise there's music playing everywhere.
Nice.
And it's not Arabic music. It's, all sorts of music. Everybody from, Rihanna through to hip hop to whatever. There's music everywhere. And it was like such a little thing, but it was significant difference. And the country's changed. I mean, walking into the office and seeing, our building, the building I work in, I think we've got 600, 700 people, and it's 40% women.
Nice.
Whereas where I worked before, it was 100% men.
Yeah.
So now, the company I'm in, we've got 3 women CEOs.
Yeah, no, it's been a rapid,
huge change.
A rapid change, but handled very successfully, I would say. So it feels like a very sort of stable, entrepreneurial and forward moving country.
I think it's great. And I think going back to the road trip, and the thing about the road trip there was, for us as 2 expats, and I was actually living there, you were visiting, but as 2 expats, everywhere we went, our eyes were being opened all the time to, the history of the place, the culture of the place, the driving of the place, but the vastness of the place as well. Saudi Arabia is an absolutely massive country.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely massive.
And for anyone who may have visited the Expo 2020 in Dubai and saw the Saudi pavilion, I think that really showed how big Saudi Arabia is and how many opportunities there are to see many, many different things. Because that's one thing I never expected for Saudi, because you literally think it's desert and that's it. But it's so big that you've got places with mountains, you've got places that are on the Red Sea, for example. You've got areas with forests. It's really, they did, you remember this massive advertising campaign that they did? I mean, it was all around at least the Middle East.
Yeah.
And they would flash up an image and they're like, is this the Seychelles? And then it'd be, no, this is Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And, then they'd flash up another image of like, is this the Black Forest of Germany? And it's like, no, this is Saudi Arabia. And it really opened everyone's eyes. Excellent. From a marketing perspective, that was a brilliant campaign.
Well, for me, I mean, I'd moved back to Germany at that point in time, and I remember somebody said, "Have you seen the Saudi campaign?" I said, "No." And then, and I was actually watching TV, and it came on, and I didn't know it was the Saudi campaign. I just saw this ad come on, and I was looking at it, and it was only that there was one or two women that had headdress, because they were very, very clever. They showed a lot of expats in the advert, and they showed a lot of, I would say, more liberal Saudis.
Right.
So not everybody had the head covering on, but a couple did, and it looked like, oh, I want to go there, I want to go there, I want to go there, and then at the end it came up with Visit Saudi.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's Saudi.
Yeah.
Why did I not go to that part when I lived there? It was
it really triggered us to want to go and see other places.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the road trip. The one thing I remember is the music.
Yes. Well, that was a thing, because first of all, as I said, I'd had to rent this car from the car hire, who suddenly realised, oh, did I say I was going to get you a car? And then wait here and I'll bring a car. And then somebody turned up with a car, which was a mess. But fortunately it had a plug-in, so I was able to plug music in. One of the great things for me is when I'm with somebody I don't really know that well, is when I can play music and they don't go, can you really change this? I'm not really into that. But when it was like, oh, I like that one, who's that by? Oh, I like that one, who's that by? And so that makes it much more relaxing. And having said that, remember where we did meet? That was at
night. We met at an R&B night, basically.
So that was
in Dubai.
So that kind of ticked the box. But yeah, I'm trying to think of what would have been the track at the time, but it was mainly R&B.
Yeah, I mean, so I remember you being very shocked at my own music collection as well. So you started, right? You're a ex-DJ and still a DJ in your heart. And although driving, we're still DJing as we were riding along. But at some stage, we then switched to my playlist. Yeah. And I remember you being shocked sometimes at like how hardcore that you found it to be.
You're a dancehall girl.
I like dancehall, exactly.
Because for anybody not looking at this video, this podcast, have a look at Sarah. Have a look at Sarah. She does not strike you as Miss Sean Paul and dancehall classics. No.
I look like a BBC newsreader or your supply teacher that's coming for the week.
Yeah, but anyway, so I was very, very shocked at that, and but entertained as well. So it helped the hours pass by.
This track, Buff Daddy, came on. I don't know if you remember this.
Yes.
J Hus. And when the track came on, you immediately said that like this was my song, like it was the song reminded you of me and when we first met. And I'd never heard the song before. Or if I'd heard it, I was just dancing to it without realizing what it was. But
which is another thing so those of you got the BBC newscaster reference, she doesn't dance like a BBC newscaster. She dances like that dirty gal you meet in Urchabeen.
Now people have got all kind of like weird observations in their head, like K to AD twerking or something. Twerking.
Oh, yeah. So no, not the Angela Rippon moves either. But anyway, so it was very interesting listening to your music and the mix of music, and it was quite relaxing as well for the trip. It made it very enjoyable, especially when I was driving on that crazy road. So if anyone who, I would say driving in Saudi is an adventure that you should endure at least and sometimes only once, because I remember I moved to Saudi in June, and we did that road trip in June 2014, and did that road trip in November, December.
I guess. I mean, it was out of the heat of the summer. I remember.
Yeah, so it was late in the year, and I remember that was the one and only time that I ever drove in Saudi for the 3.5 years.
Really?
Yeah, I never drove there
I
again
feel
after.
privileged.
I never drove there after until I moved back in 2021.
Yeah.
I never drove there again because it was traumatic.
Well, you looked very calm. I didn't feel like I was
Secret weapon.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I was ever in danger or that you were scared while we were driving.
Well, that's, if you're panicking, don't share it.
I guess
Keep
so.
it to yourself.
You're a good captain. So we did the 6-hour drive across, and then we arrived in Dammam, right?
That was funny as well. So I booked the hotel, and I said 2 rooms for 1 person. And when we got there, they'd translated that into 1 room for 2 people. And the look on your
Yeah, because we're friends, right? There's no romance involved between us. Plus,
you don't have to make
haram,
that.
right?
You don't have to make it so emphatic. Yeah, you're right. We're buddies.
We're buddies,
But-
and it's haram, right? It's
Yeah.
not like if you're in a like a European country, you could possibly like share a room with a man who you're not married to or related to, but. Yeah, in Saudi, and particularly at the time, it was.
Particularly at the time, there was all
it was
sorts.
not allowed. Yeah.
Yeah, there was all sorts of things in the newspaper. I mean, there was a YouTube clip of a guy being accosted, let's use that word, by the religious police just for talking to a woman in a supermarket. And I mean, it was very, very. There was that tension.
Right.
There was that tension that was always there of what is the rule, and ignorance of the rules is not a defence against the
Right,
rule,
right.
and punishment was meted out immediately.
Yeah.
So, but we didn't realise that you're not allowed to get in a car with somebody you're not a family member with and drive across to the other side of the country. So we didn't know that. So
We were quite lucky actually, because you're right. As a single woman and a single man, we were not supposed to be traveling that distance together, which was a bit confusing because I'd been there on business and I had been traveling with my male colleagues a lot. And when I got back to the office after our weekend trip, and they, asked me what I'd done, and I explained, joyfully that I've been on a trip with my male friend. They were all shocked that we weren't caught, and it was
caught. That's an interest. I mean, that's the thing is we could have been caught.
Yeah.
Not even knowing we were doing anything that was
Right,
wrong. So,
right.
yeah. But it was worth it. I mean, and getting to Dammam was another eye opener. So we got into the hotel. After some negotiation, we got our 2 separate rooms on 2 separate floors, as far as humanly possible. I am not with her. And then we went out to explore Dammam, which, we learnt was the home of Saudi Aramco.
yeah.
Didn't know that before we got there, so that was quite interesting. And then
I think it was the first time also that we'd experienced. We'd been out to dinner in restaurants in Riyadh, right?
Yeah.
But do you remember the restaurant in Dammam and like the family section? That was
yes, because that was the first time we'd been able to. Well, we were able to go into the family section in the restaurant because we were a couple. So that was great. But who would have known?
Yeah.
Because there was blinds everywhere. People would come in and say, "I'll take a table for 4," and then they'd put a blind across it, so you didn't know who was behind it.
It was definitely very interesting to look at, because the idea of the family section is that there are no kind of predatory single males, I guess, and so everyone should sort of feel comfortable, and yet families would come into that part of the restaurant and then ask for a screen to be put around them so they couldn't be viewed while they were eating, which, by the way, I don't think is a bad thing, considering like I eat like a 4-year-old, so I also
Council estate.
exactly grew up on a council estate, no manners. So I'm not a glamorous eater, so I wouldn't mind sometimes to have a shield around me. But that was quite that was quite interesting. I think.
My brain just kept on saying, why come out to eat and then sit behind the screen?
Yeah.
Order takeaway,
That's the point, right? Order a takeaway.
Yeah, order home delivery. So, but anyway, you're in a different country, you're in a different culture, and it's a learning opportunity for you. So it was great. It was great for that. And then, we went out after that.
at the time, there's not so much entertainment in Saudi. That's changing a lot. Like, we'll talk a little bit, I think, about how Saudi has changed like dramatically. But at the time, we walked along the Corniche. We went to this heritage museum. You know, we've got those photos of me posing on the stairs in my abaya. So it was very sort of genteel activities.
Yeah, it was. I mean, remember, it was the weekend as well. So we got there Friday. So Friday afternoon, it was by the time we got there, having left early. Mr. Google saying it would take 4 hours, and it didn't. But, you know, we got there, and obviously Friday afternoon, everybody's just starting to come out because it's prayers on Friday morning. So it was very, very quiet still. Yeah. And we were still learning that, you know, Friday evening is when the activity really happens. Right. So, and we didn't know Dammam, so we didn't know where the action was. It's on the Corniche for anybody who wants to go, but it's on the Corniche and it's completely changed now anyway. But so we did that. We did the long walk along the Corniche and saw the water tower and all of those, and saw the people starting to come out for their picnics and everything.
Yeah, that was beautiful actually. Lots of outdoor activity.
Yeah, and we went to as you say, we went to the Heritage Museum, and they had all of the history around how Saudi Aramco had started, Arab American Oil Company. Which I learned there as well, and it's amazing how that joining of cultures had made Dammam so, in quotes, cosmopolitan,
right?
In comparison to even how Riyadh, the capital, was at the time. Riyadh seemed to be a lot more conservative,
right.
And had a much more tense vibe about it. Even though where we were staying, which was in the middle of town, was supposed to be the happening area, but Riyadh was a lot more conservative than Dammam. Dammam seemed to be like, oh yeah, things are going on unless you're going out for dinner behind the screen. Yeah. But it was a really, really interesting.
Yeah, it was great, great vibes. So what would you say was the most memorable part of that trip?
Memorable part? Yeah. I have some. I have the toilet.
The toilets are memorable. Not in a good way.
In the most horrid of ways. It was cesspit. I used to go camping when I was in the Air Cadets, and you'd have to dig a hole in the ground, and that was the toilet. Well, that was the toilet in Saudi, and it brought back horrid memories.
Especially on the trip across the desert, you mean?
Yeah.
Where we were stopping at random garages and things, and it was like a metal hut. Yeah.
I mean, you're lucky because you're in and out of a toilet faster than anyone I have ever seen in my life. Still,
I do have a random. When I was younger, I did used to race boys in the local pub to see who could like be in and out of the toilets quicker. So, and I always won. But it means I have to go very often, so we were always we were always on the lookout for a toilet for me, unfortunately.
So the toilets was one thing. The driving was another thing because I'd never seen driving like that anywhere in my life, not even in the worst movies. And but in terms of scenery, I mean, Dammam is very. I still think it's a very pretty place, and the Corniche, for me, is very, very tranquil, even when it's packed full of people.
It is a very peaceful place, actually.
It still feels very, very peaceful. It's got a nice vibe to it. So I like that. Those were the best parts. And obviously your company. And that goes without saying.
Bless you. What do you think, for you, what was the most surprising thing about Saudi Arabia in the times that you've lived there? Or
I think the first time I went there, it was... Well, I lived in Riyadh, and as I said, the first thing about the important thing about Riyadh was the conservativeness of it. However, in amongst that, I like rules. You know, I like a rules-based society. I live in Germany. I like a rules-based society. I like to know what you can and what you can't do, and I think, you know, as long as you know the rules, you can pretty much do anything, as long as you stick by the rules.
Right.
So for me, the first thing about Saudi was it was very, very rules-based, but I didn't know what the rules were.
Right.
So it was very difficult at that point in time, and then I learned them, and then it was just a fantastic place to be. The second time, the rules have all changed. The place has completely changed, and it's very, you know, the only thing that's missing, and I'd say missing loosely, is alcohol. But, you know, if you can live without alcohol, as the vast majority of the world does, you know, no problem at all. It's a fantastic place to be. You can go out, you can have fun, you can listen to music, you can go to the cinema. You know, you can do everything that you want to do. It's a great place to be.
Absolutely. I think
And you?
So the most surprising thing for me was that this stems back to our road trip, but that you can get claustrophobic in the desert.
Oh God.
It's the weirdest sensation when you're traveling across really a very, very vast area. So you have all of this space, and yet I had the most bizarre attack of what felt like sort of claustrophobia, because you couldn't see the exit.
Yeah.
There was no end, right? Like all you could see around you was, it was like one really, really, really long road that just flowed into the distance. And then around you, it was just sand, like sand forever and ever and ever. And there's no buildings or anything, right? So there's no sense of perspective or anything like that. And it felt a bit like, if anyone has lived in Europe, it felt like a whiteout, you know, like when you're driving in the middle of a snowstorm. But it sort of, to me, it felt like that. It was suddenly like I was really, really anxious because I didn't know where the exit was.
And I remember that. I actually remember you saying that, because I looked at you and looked a little bit nervous. What's wrong? You said, I'm feeling claustrophobic. Okay, we're in a car in a desert. Open the door.
Yeah, I think I was like winding down the windows. It's like I need to get out. You know?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, claustrophobic in the desert.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember that, and you did emanate that feeling of nervousness and tension.
It's strangely coming back, I was fine. I think because I knew that there was sort of an end to it, but it was, it was a bit weird. And what would you say the song of the trip was, or what was your song of the trip?
Well, the thing that reminds me of Saudi the first time is Black Coffee. You know, Black Coffee and his first couple of albums. So that always reminds me of it. And in fact, anytime I think of that, it reminds me of Saudi. And anytime I think of the first experience of Saudi, I think of you. So Black Coffee is Sarah. I know some people are not going to like hearing that, but Black Coffee is Sarah because it's Saudi.
Okay, that's the first time I've heard that from you, actually.
No, it's true. It's true. When I was in Riyadh, I remember, particularly for the last 2 years, because I was DJing, but no one heard me say that. I was DJing in Saudi in a bar, and no one heard me say that either. But I was but I used to play a lot of R&B and hip hop, but when I was at home in my hotel room, I listened to Black Coffee. Okay. And so when I think of Saudi, I think of Black Coffee. And when I think of Black Coffee and Saudi, when I think of Saudi, particularly it's session number one, I think of you. Okay. Because you made the first few months bearable. Yeah. And I'm sure you were fabricating meetings with the ministries to come over. I was
traveling like at least 2 or 3 times a month over. I had a lot of work in Saudi at the time. No, but you also made it bearable for me, right? Because otherwise I would have been sitting in my hotel room every night. Whereas, you know, we used to go to Kampai, go to Talia Street, etc. Yeah. But the other song I remember is No Scrubs by TLC, because that came on and
I told you my story.
Yeah, and you'd sort of told me how inspiring the song was, that you'd heard this song and realised that maybe you weren't being the best type of man that you could be. I think, not to put words in your mouth, but then...
I was very scrub-like at the time. Unintentionally, I wasn't scrubbing up very well, but I was very scrub-like.
So I always, when I hear TLC now, I always think of you for that.
2 top bands, Black Coffee and TLC.
Exactly, right? No, I loved Saudi because of the music. I think we had our best soundtrack of our whole trips was for Saudi.
Well, we had long enough. That was
exactly. But talking about our friendships, what do you think is unique about our friendship? Like, obviously we're doing this podcast because a few people have said to us how unique they find our friendship. And we haven't been friends for that long. It's just over a decade. So it's not like we knew each other before we came to the Middle East.
No. And I think it was, actually, you know, it was born of music, because I was just getting ready to leave unwillingly, but I was getting ready to leave Dubai. And so I started going to these Internations meetings. and there was an R&B one, and I thought, well, that'd be quite interesting. And I turned up, and you were there. And then you told me you like to travel, and your sense of humor is, I hope it's coming across here, but your sense of humor is just, you're mental. You're, you're absolutely mental. You're hilarious. You see humor in the funniest things in the, well, that's where humor is, but you see humor in the strangest places, but you can make the strangest things humorous as well.
But from a unique perspective, I think one of the things is...
Well, we're exact opposites, aren't we, apart from our background?
Well, what I was going to say is that we're because we both made friends as adults, right? Which is strange anyway, because I think a lot of people, unless they've like moved to a new city like we did, you know, you stick to your circle of friends after a certain age, right? And the other big thing is that you're married, right? And a lot of people
Damn, she outed me.
a lot of people question like how we can be friends when you're married, like, and I'm a single woman, and we travel together, right?
When Harry met Sally.
I don't quite get that reference.
When Harry met Sally, Harry and Sally drive to New York.
Oh, really?
And they're in the car, and Harry says to Sally, a man and a woman can't be friends.
Oh, right.
A man and woman can't be friends, and Sally says, I don't agree with that. And he says, and Harry says to Sally, a man and woman can't be friends because at one point he's going to think about wanting to sleep with her, and if he conveys that to her, immediately it creates a barrier, and then they can't be friends.
I see.
So whenever man and woman are friends, it always reminds me of when Harry met Sally.
Okay.
Because it's a big step to overcome that.
Right.
And it's amazing how many times you meet a man and a woman who are friends and they're not in a relationship, and you say, yeah, but you thought about sleeping with her. No. I never thought about it. Well, you just did.
Yeah, that's because you put it into their frame
But
of mind.
the friendship means if you are friends, you can move beyond that.
Yeah.
If you're not friends, you never were.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
No, and we moved beyond that immediately, because I knew you. First of all, I knew you were married, but secondly, we had many other things in common, right? Like the traveling and the music,
the music and the comedy,
and
the background.
Yeah, and I mean, I liked what we were talking earlier about what makes our outside of this room. What we were talking about, what makes our friendship unique, and
big black man, small white woman.
Yes, he's a big black man, and I'm a not so small white woman. But thank you for the compliment.
Yeah.
And you were saying, like, if you took a photograph of us, like, we're the negatives of each other,
we're
right?
the negatives of each other, yeah. But having said that, we also come from the same background. I mean, the council, or in America you'd call them projects, but in the rest of the world you call them whatever you call them.
Subsidised housing.
I've always loved that term because
we both grew up in England, both on council estates, both were the first in our families to go to grammar schools.
Yeah.
Then we both lived in Germany at different times. Well, actually at the same time, we didn't know each other then. And then we both ended up in the Middle East. So we had that also similar background that sort of bonded us.
Similar paths that got us here, different reasons, but we both done the same journey. And I think it's quite interesting as well because it means that there's a subtext that we can talk about things, and even though for the vast majority of our lives, and like you say, we became friends as grown-ups. I mean, not 21-year-olds, adults at university or whatever, but full-grown adults. Yeah,
we're both past middle-aged at this point.
Chronologically.
yes,
chronologically. But because of that, we also have this thing where we have that little subtext where we can talk about things amongst ourselves, and we both know what we're talking about, even when other people have no clue.
Yeah.
And we don't even have to explain that because we immediately know, and that's something I find that quite bonding when you can do that with people.
Because it's comfortable and you don't have to try.
You don't have to try. Yeah. And that's another thing.
We put no effort into our friendship whatsoever.
but it's also one of the things which really helps when we're on the road trips because, like you say, there's the music. So we'll both be listening to the music even while we're talking, but we'll also go quiet, and we can be, and that's something that's really, really difficult to do is to find somebody that you can go quiet with.
Absolutely.
and just observe your scenario. Or, you know, I'm a bloke, we think about nothing. But it's great to be able to think about nothing without having somebody saying, what are you thinking about? Because I know you don't care.
That's quite true, actually. Yes.
And I don't feel bad about that.
Yeah.
You know, I actually feel comfortable about that. In the same way, I'm not going to ask you any what I would consider to be pervasive questions, because I know if you want me to know, you'll tell me.
Yeah, that's true.
And you will tell me.
Yeah, and I'll tell you if I'm not going to answer your questions as well.
Quite frequently.
That's a story for another time.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to talk about some of the other places that we've been to. So we talked about like our first road trip, but since then we've been back. I was thinking particularly the trip that we did last Eid, actually. So if you remember, it was in the height of the summer heat. So
Sarah melting time.
Sarah melting time, yes. So I wouldn't advise people to actually travel when we did, because it was a bit problematic, to be honest. But we went to Hofoff. My favourite sounding place, and we actually used your car because you lived there, and we drove around, and a lot of the sites are a bit incomplete, or they're sort of in renovation, or in some cases they were just closed. But it was still a fun trip.
And there's more happening all the time, particularly, I mean, like if you're in the Riyadh area, you've got the edge of the world, you've got, I was going to say, you can pop to Alula, but I mean, that's a journey, you have to do that. I mean, there's other cities you can go to. Jeddah is obviously on the west coast. You can go there. You can't go to Mecca or Medina if you're not a Muslim, but, you know, that's obvious. Obviously, Neom and the Red Sea area, that's all starting to develop now. So there's a lot of things and lots of sites and places that you can go to in that region or in the country, because it's a massive place.
And talking about the other places that we'd like to go to, so I really would like to go to Al Ula. I'd like to go to Riyadh season, actually, to see Sean Paul play. I really need to. I know I've followed him around the world, but I really need to see like Sean Paul in Saudi.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about tips and tricks about traveling in Saudi, because I know a lot of people are still concerned about traveling. So one of the first things I would say is to go on to visitsaudi.com. That's a great website, talks about everywhere you can go. It's also where you get all of your visas. But maybe let's start with the dress code, right? Which is what's in everyone's mind.
Yeah.
So
it's changed.
It's changed. Yeah.
The bottom line, it's changed. I mean, as Sarah said, when she first arrived, you know, she wasn't wearing an abaya, and I used to travel backwards and forwards all the time, and it was amazing. You turn up at the airport in Saudi, and all the women were dressed in black abayas and head covering, and then you get off at the other end, and it was as though you'd stepped into Paris fashion parade, because the black would disappear and all sorts of colours and heels and everything were all in display, and the reverse coming back. It's not like that anymore. I mean, it's a Islamic country. It's conservative, only in so much as it's, you know, don't go with all your bits hanging out.
Don't go anywhere with all your bits hanging out, by the way.
True, but, you know, really,
it's not big and it's not clever.
It's not big and it's not clever, and it's be respectful, you know. So from a female perspective, you know, you don't have to. You don't have to be covered. You don't have to wear an abaya anymore. You don't have to cover your head, but just be dressed decent.
Yeah, just dress conservatively. It's called modest dressing, basically.
That's the word I was trying to think of, modest. And if you don't know what that is, ask your grandmother. Unless you come from Essex, because then she's probably almost the same age.
Oh, God. That's going to get us thrown out.
Not at all. Essex people love it. But anyway, and guys, obviously, you know, we're lucky. We can get away with wearing pretty much everything. But, you know, again, modest, you know, don't go, you know, you're not walking around in your swimmers, for example, especially if they're Speedos. But, you know, we're you know, dress conservatively. Culturally, big one, PDAs, personal displays of affection. You know, at the airport, we all love to grab each other and say, oh, hi, and you'll see everybody do that. But, you know, again, no eating face, you know, no fondling and all of that kind of stuff. And even holding hands, it's something as simple as holding hands. You'll only see married couples holding hands. So again, be conservative in your manner, be conservative in your behaviour. Obviously, the plane will tell you alcohol is banned. Even when you're on the plane flying to Saudi Arabia, once you get into Saudi airspace, they will tell you bringing alcohol into the country is prohibited. If you're getting at duty free, you can generally not buy it anyway. Once you show your boarding pass, they won't sell it to you. Don't pack it in your bags because you might get stopped and thrown out of the country. So there's that. Same sex.
Yeah.
Not recognised.
Illegal, yeah.
Yeah, I went with not recognised. Yes, it's illegal. For now, everywhere changes, but for now it's illegal, so don't display is probably the best way.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. And what about like traveling during Ramadan and Eid and all of that? What would you advise people?
Yeah. So Saudi is still a bit more conservative when it comes to adherence to Ramadan. Ramadan means that, the Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset. And at sunset, they break fast. But it's not necessarily at sunset. It's at a time that they will clearly stipulate. What that means is no eating or drinking in public. Okay? And while when I first got there, that would be very, very harshly punished.
Right.
Now you probably get told very, very sharply, don't do that. And it's disrespectful, so don't do it.
But it's still okay to travel, right? And actually,
traveling is fine.
I think in some cases, it's nice to travel during those holidays and high days and religious festivals because there's lots of celebrations going on. Yeah. So you talked
especially Eid, Ramadan less, but in the evening. So after sunset, in every place I've been to in the Gulf during Ramadan, after sunset, it's mental. Everybody's out partying, enjoying themselves, really having a good time during those dark hours, and then it quiets down throughout the day.
They have this thing called iftar, right, which is when
6 o'clock.
The fast is broken in the evening, and it's really nice. It's a really nice atmosphere that even as a non-Muslim, you're welcome to join in.
And it's great. I mean, people, you're driving in your car, you get to the traffic lights, and there's people there handing out food, water, and snacks for you.
Very nice. And then the last thing would be to talk about the weather. So it is not like it's not a country to necessarily visit all year round. Although having said that, there are some places in Saudi which are a lot cooler.
Yeah.
Do
your research. Yeah, definitely do your research. I mean, so for example, at this time of the year, January, from about November to January, February. For us who live here, it's cold.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I am freezing. I'm wearing a jacket all the time.
I have a heater in my room in January. Yeah.
And it's like 19 degrees and it's cold. And it feels very, very cold. Conversely, you get to the summer and you're talking 40, 50 degrees outside. It's, you go outside and you feel your face cook. But again, having said that, do your research. Know where you're going. Know where you have to be. Everything is air conditioned, and so much so that, sometimes you have to carry a coat with you
absolutely.
In the summer because it is so cold. And it's not that it's that cold, it's just that the contrast. If it's 50 degrees, if it's 45 degrees outside and 20 degrees inside, that's a huge temperature drop. So again, do your research, but and plan when you want to go and where you want to go, because like Sarah mentioned, we travelled during Eid when everything was closed.
Yeah.
You want to go out in the daytime, everything's closed, so you have to go out in the evening, which makes for different planning.
So Tony and I did this trip independently. So the trips that we've done in Saudi, we've done independently. Obviously, he lives there. It's an easy thing for him to hire a car and for us to arrange things. But there are a lot of trips. A lot of the trips that we've done in other countries are arranged through Escape Travels, which is a boutique travel company that focuses in on small group travel. And they've given us a discount code for anyone who books one of their trips. So I'm going to give you the discount code now. It's K for Kuwait, F for France, Y for Yemen, E for Ethiopia, P for Poland, L for Liberia, Q for Qatar, and P for, let me think, P for
Papua New Guinea.
Papua New Guinea. There we go. So do have a look at them. I mention it now because we were talking about Al Ula, and actually that's the next trip that I would love us to do with Escape, actually. So with if you look on their website, which is escape -travels.com, and they have many trips around the region.
And just to give you that code again, it's KFYEPLQP.
And we'll put it on the screen anyway. So we've come to the end of the session. Do let us know if you want us to share more about actually living as expats in the Middle East, and not just specific trips that we have taken. Our next episode, we're heading to South Korea.
Indeed,
yes. We're going to South Korea, where we'll share our stories about our trip to Seoul, finding secret clubs in Gangnam, and we'll also continue to unlock what it means for us to be friends. I think we've survived this episode as friends, and I hope that that continues on till the end of the series. This was our first episode in a series of 6, so stay with us as we
bantering across borders.
Yeah, as we banter across even more borders.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cheers, Sarah.